Exercise 1. Movies and cartoons sometimes portray scientists as loners in white lab coats, working in isolated labs. In reality, science is an intensely social activity. Most scientists work in teams, which often include both graduate and undergraduate students. And to succeed in science, it helps to be a good communicator. Research results have no impact until shared with a community of peers through seminars, publications, and websites. And in fact, research papers aren't published until they are vetted by colleagues in what is called the peer review process. Most of the examples of scientific inquiry described in science textbooks for college students, for instance, have all been published in peer-reviewed journals. Exercise 2. The immune system is the body's defense against foreign invaders such as bacteria. The immune system protects and preserves the body's integrity, and it does this by developing antibodies to attack hostile invaders. We know that the immune system begins to decline after adolescence, and the weakening of immune function is linked to age-related vulnerability. According to the autoimmune theory of aging, the system may eventually become defective and no longer distinguish the body's own tissues from foreign tissues. The body may then begin to attack itself, as suggested by the rising incidence of autoimmune diseases with advancing age. Exercise 3. When a painter is working for a patron, as Leonardo da Vinci did for the Medici, there can be emotional communication resulting from the artist's intention to produce something that the patron will appreciate and enjoy. Even Vincent van Gogh, who was isolated and sold few paintings in his life, cared about the reactions of his brother to the paintings that he produced. Some artists often take pains concerning the framing and presentation of their work for the benefit of the viewers of their art, such as when Mark Rothko was highly particular about the lighting of his paintings. So painting is a social process involving the communication of emotional judgments of the artist to the people who view it. Painters cannot expect viewers to appreciate their work with exactly the same perceptions and emotions that went into their creation, but they can hope to generate some approximation of these. Exercise 4. Salt was historically so costly and important in Europe that its consumption was linked to social status. In the medieval world, with its rigid hierarchy, the way in which people dined and the food that they ate reflected their position in society. Royalty and nobility sat at the high table, positioned on a dais, while their social inferiors ate at lower tables below them. Among the privileges granted to the elite was access to salt, placed in a container on the high table. This clear expression of social divide is reflected in the phrases above the salt, referring to someone of high rank, and below the salt, which means someone of lower rank or less socially acceptable. Exercise 5. If you stop to think about all the tiny parts that make up any one thing, you could be thinking about it for quite some time. There are almost an infinite number of things that influence and impact any larger thing, right down to atoms and smaller molecules. A computer, for example, looks like a big hunk of metal and glass, but if you look closer, moving your way down from the big things to the tiniest parts that make the computer up, you start to see how a computer is really many smaller things combined to make something bigger. A computer isn't just a computer. It's metal, glass, and plastic, screws, springs, wires, copper, ink, electricity, and so much more. How those small parts come together to make the bigger parts is what matters. But how often do we take time to think about that fact? Exercise 6. Taub and his co-workers have already found strong evidence that the brain can be healed by its own plasticity. Amazingly, some people who have lost the use of an arm through a stroke have been trained to use it again by having the good arm restrained and being forced to use the apparently dead one, a technique called constraint-induced CI movement therapy. Even though the part of the brain that controlled the arm was damaged, The CI movement therapy forced the brain to open up new areas in order to move the dead limb. Similar results have been produced with speech impairment and even dyslexia. Although this research is still in its early days, Michael Merzenich of the University of California, San Francisco, believes the brain's plasticity may really enable us to protect ourselves against age decline. Exercise 7. When you watch a documentary on a small standard 4x3 video screen and then see it on an equally small widescreen 16:9 receiver, you probably notice relatively little energy change. When you switch from the small screen to a large HD TV screen, however, the energy change is readily apparent. This is why some movies that emphasize landscape, from actual landscapes to spaceships or battle scenes, must be seen on the large screen to feel the total impact. Even if you use proper conversion methods for aspect ratios, squeezing such large images into the small video screen reduces not only image size, but also, if not especially, event energy. Close-ups, inductive sequencing, and a dense audio track help generate some aesthetic energy on the small video screen, but they cannot compete with the large movie images and high-volume surround sound. Exercise 8. Revegetation techniques are put in place with an understanding of the resultant effects on wildlife. For instance, the planting of tree lines and woodland areas within roadside landscape may naturally force birds to fly higher above roads when crossing between forest edges, as was shown in the Netherlands. Verges should be widened, and landscape planting on bends or curves on a road should be set back to improve visibility and to discourage crossings by wildlife. In contrast, along straight sections of road carriageway, vegetative cover should extend as close to the road as permitted by road construction and safety standards. Landscaping of center medians, junctions, roundabouts, or interchanges should be sensitive to wildlife. Berry-producing plants should not be selected, as they may prove attractive yet fatal to wildlife due to the close proximity of traffic.